The Spanish Minister of Marine wrote a letter in April 1898 stating clearly that the Spanish Navy would be destroyed in a war against the United States. He sent the fleet anyway. This is not a story about military miscalculation. Every senior naval officer in Madrid knew the mathematics. The American Navy was larger, newer, better equipped. The American economy was 7 times larger than Spain's. The men who understood those facts, the admirals, the senior staff, the minister who wrote the letter, understood them completely. This is a story about a government that chose to lose a war rather than face the domestic consequences of not fighting one. Sagasta read the naval letter at his government desk in Madrid, and his hands were flat on the document and his face showed the calculation of a man who has received a conclusion he already knew. The letter confirmed what the cabinet had been told. The confirmation changed nothing. The fleet would sail. In the cabinet room, the naval officer delivered the military assessment. The map showed American positions in the Caribbean and Pacific. The map showed Spanish positions. The comparison was visible from across the room. The assessment was delivered with professional precision because the naval officer was a professional and precision was what he had. The naval letter's conclusion was specific: the Navy will be destroyed. The language was formal. The handwriting was clean. The prediction was accurate. Sagasta's hands rested on the document and the face above the hands did the calculation, and the calculation produced the only answer available: send the fleet anyway. Havana Harbor in 1898 was the harbor where the USS Maine had exploded 2 months earlier. The wreckage was still there. The 1976 American investigation would conclude the explosion was probably accidental. Spain likely did not blow up the Maine. The war it started was real regardless. Cuba was 3 years into its independence revolt. 200,000 Spanish soldiers had been sent across the Atlantic. Most of what was killing them was yellow fever and dysentery rather than the independence fighters. 200,000 soldiers. The climate was defeating more of them than the enemy. The Spanish military had made their position clear: any concession, any retreat from Cuba without military defeat, would be seen as a betrayal of national honor. The army would not tolerate it. The implicit threat was sufficient. It did not need to be made explicit. The impossible room. On one wall, Cuba, 3 years of independence revolt, 200,000 sick and depleted soldiers, no path to military victory. On the second wall, America, 70 million people, a modern navy, a press corps in war cry. On the third wall, the Spanish military threatening civil consequences if the government concedes. On the fourth wall, the Spanish public, told the war is winnable, believing it. The Spanish generals told the civilian government that a negotiated withdrawal would be unacceptable. They used formal diplomatic language. The formal language contained an informal threat. Everyone in the room understood the threat. The civilian representative wrote it down. The notation was accurate. The notation was shown to Sagasta. The Madrid crowd around the newspaper posting board believed Spain could win. They believed this because their leaders told them so. Their leaders knew it was not true. Their leaders told them anyway. The crowd that a government cannot survive defying was the most powerful constraint in the room. Sagasta watched the crowd from his office window and understood what the crowd represented politically, the constraint that was more powerful than any military analysis. The naval letter said the Navy would be destroyed. The crowd below the window did not know about the letter. Britain was asked for diplomatic support.
Thank you.
The British official who received the Spanish request had already decided his answer. Britain was moving closer to Washington. Britain's assessment of Spain was private and specific and shared in internal diplomatic communications, a backwards has-been. The Spanish diplomat left London with nothing. France worried about an American Pacific Empire, but military intervention was impossible. France relied on American trade. France's best option was diplomatic mediation, and the Americans had made clear they wanted zero European interference. France watched and hoped and had no leverage. Germany saw the approaching war as potentially useful. German warships shadowed the American fleet in the Pacific. The calculation in Berlin: if America won, perhaps Germany could acquire the Philippines. The calculation was wrong. The Americans had no interest in German participation on any terms. Behind the public conversation, Spain will fight, Spain can win, national honor demands it, there was a private conversation. In letters, in cabinet meetings, the war would be lost. The question was not whether to win. The question was how to lose in a way the monarchy survived. The Spanish government declared war on April 25, 1898, having already received the American declaration 4 days earlier. The declaration was the answer to the impossible room. Not the best answer. The least bad answer. In April 1898, those were the only two categories available. The declaration of war was not optimism. It was the specific decision of a government that had calculated which disaster was survivable. A lost war, survivable. A concession without fighting, not survivable. The government chose survivable. Both choices were catastrophic. Survivable was the only available distinction. Manila Bay, dawn, May 1, 1898. The American Asiatic Squadron moved into the bay in the dark with engines at reduced speed. The Spanish colonial fleet was at anchor, not yet aware of what the darkness contained. The naval officer's letter had been accurate. The demonstration of its accuracy was 7 hours away. Dewey watched the Spanish fleet from the Olympia's bridge with the expression of a professional who has done the planning and is watching the execution proceed as planned. The 7-hour clock had not yet started. It would start when the order was given. The order was given. The Battle of Manila Bay lasted 7 hours. The Spanish Pacific Fleet was destroyed. Not one American sailor was killed in battle. The naval officer had written that the Navy would be destroyed. He had been correct in April. He was confirmed correct in May. The letter was accurate. The precise naval officer's face during the battle showed not surprise but the specific expression of a man watching something he predicted unfold exactly as predicted. He had said it in the letter. He had said it in the cabinet briefing. The cabinet had heard him. The fleet had sailed anyway. The fleet was now being destroyed. Santiago de Cuba harbor entrance. July 3rd. The Spanish Atlantic Fleet got underway in sequence and emerged from the harbor entrance into the open Caribbean where the American squadron was waiting. The ships were flying their battle flags. The ships knew what was waiting. The ships went out anyway. The Spanish fleet commander's face as the harbor fell behind showed the expression of a man performing his duty with complete awareness of the outcome. The duty was clear. The outcome was clear. The duty and the outcome had been clear since April. He performed the duty. The outcome followed. 4 hours. The Spanish Atlantic Fleet, like the Pacific Fleet before it, was destroyed in 4 hours. The letter had predicted both outcomes. Both predictions were confirmed within 63 days of each other. Both fleets gone. The letter was in the archive. The archive was still in Madrid. Sagasta received the Manila Bay telegram in the cabinet room with the expression of a man whose prediction has been confirmed rather than shocked. The dark exhausted eyes processed the telegram. The face showed the specific grimness of a conclusion arriving as scheduled. This was the second confirmation. The first had come in April in writing. The Cuban land campaign lasted 10 weeks. The Spanish army of 200,000, depleted by years of guerrilla war, outgunned, lacking adequate supply, was defeated in a series of engagements that ended with Spain requesting terms. The numbers that had looked large on paper in Madrid were not large in Cuba in July. The Spanish soldier Cuba handed his rifle to an American soldier with hollow cheeks and dark sunken eyes that had seen 2 years of this particular climate's version of war. The rifle passed from Spanish hands to American hands and the empire passed with it as much as in any formal ceremony. Paris, December 1898. The treaty signing room. American delegates whose faces showed satisfied victory. Spanish delegates whose faces showed rehearsed dignity. 400 years of Spanish imperial presence in the Americas and Pacific being formally given away across a polished table in a room with chandeliers. The Spanish diplomat's hand was steady on the pen. The signature was performed with the dignity the government chose war to preserve. The signature was the confirmation of everything the naval letter had predicted in April. Cuba gone. Philippines gone. Puerto Rico gone. Guam gone. The signature contained all of it. The empire that Columbus expanded in 1492 ended in Paris in December 1898. The same year Columbus found a new world, the world that exploration built reached its formal end. 400 years between the departure and the signature. The harbor was the same harbor. The empire was not the same empire. Madrid after the treaty. The city continued. The streets continued. The revolution the government feared did not materialize. The monarchy survived. The calculation was correct, fighting preserved more of the structure than not fighting would have. The calculation was correct. The price was correct. The empire was not in the price's calculation. Sagasta at his desk after the treaty looked at the same desk surface where he had read the naval letter in April. The letter had been accurate. The decision to send the fleet anyway had been made at this desk. The decision was correct in its calculation. The empire ended anyway. Both things are true simultaneously. The Spanish general whose institution had threatened civilian consequences for any concession sat at his desk in the aftermath. The concession happened anyway, with a lost war between the threat and the concession. The general's face showed the expression of an institution that enforced an impossible constraint and watched the enforcement produce the outcome it was enforcing against. The newspaper presses that printed the pre-war jingoism printed the post-war accounting with the same mechanical efficiency. The presses do not choose the content. The ink is the same color. The paper runs through the same rollers. The content changes. The machinery does not comment on the change. The Spanish schoolroom map with the teacher's pointing finger moving across the areas that are no longer Spanish. Cuba gone. Philippines gone. Puerto Rico gone. The students in their seats received the accounting. They did not decide the accounting. They inherited it. The map does not show who decided. The USS Maine wreckage on the harbor floor, the ship whose explosion drove public opinion toward war, whose cause was never definitively established, whose sinking was probably accidental. Spain likely did not blow up the Maine. The war the explosion started was real. The wreckage is the same wreckage whatever caused it. Dewey's ticker tape welcome in New York Harbor. The broad weathered face showing contained professional satisfaction. 7 hours in Manila Bay. The letter that predicted the outcome was not in Dewey's welcome. The letter was in the archive. History received the victory. The archive received the prediction. Both are in different buildings. The Royal Palace in Madrid in December 1898 was still standing. The monarchy was still there. Sagasta's calculation in April had been, war is survivable, concession without war is not survivable. The palace in December confirmed the survivable half. The empire confirmed the catastrophic half. Both halves were present in the same December. Sagasta's face in December showed the face of a man who made the least bad decision available in April and is living in the world that decision produced. The empire is gone. The monarchy is not gone. The calculation was correct. Correct and catastrophic are not mutually exclusive. They were both true at once. The Spanish naval officer's office with the portrait of the fleet that no longer exists behind the desk. The officer continued to work in the institution that had predicted its own destruction and then proceeded with the destruction. Professional duty continues after the thing the duty was built to protect is gone. The office continues. Here is what the Spanish government was actually calculating in April 1898. Not whether they could win. They knew they could not win. They were calculating which disaster was survivable. A war lost after fighting, survivable, barely. A concession without war, not survivable, clearly. They chose survivable. The empire ended either way. Honor as a constraint rather than a value. The moment honor stops being something a person chooses and becomes something a system cannot escape regardless of rational analysis, that is the moment honor produces catastrophes in the name of preventing them. Spain's honor was a constraint. The constraint held. The empire broke. The Havana harbor that Columbus left from in 1492 received the Spanish failure in 1898. The same stone dock. The same water. The same geography of departure and return. What left from here 400 years ago returned here as defeat. The harbor received both without comment. The archive shelf holding the letter. The letter that predicted the fleet's destruction. Filed correctly, in the right archive, processed by the right official. The letter and the documentation of the fleet's destruction are adjacent on the same shelf. The archive does not comment on the proximity. Archives contain. They do not judge. The calculation was correct. The price was catastrophic. Both things are permanently true about April 1898. The Spanish government chose war because the alternative was worse, and war was still catastrophic, and the alternative would also have been catastrophic, and between two catastrophes a government chose the one it calculated was survivable. The fleet sailed knowing it would not return. That is not a metaphor. The men on the ships had access to the same information the admirals had. The admirals had written the letter. The letter said, "We will be destroyed." The fleet sailed. The prediction was accurate. The fleet did not return. The worst part, the part that the American sailors watching the Spanish fleet destroyed in Santiago harbor could not quite process, was that everyone on the Spanish side knew. The letter was written in April. The fleet sailed in July. The destruction happened in July. Everyone on the Spanish side knew in April. They always knew.